This week, the agenda explored the new dialogue between Tehran and Washington, parsed the positives and negatives of speaking with accents, and looked at the toll PTSD takes on military families. The agenda's Week in Review begins by asking, is Pope Francis a reformer? The church needs more priests. Some women would like to be priests. Ergo, more women should be priests. You say no, obviously. What would be so bad?
I'd like to play soccer for England. Mind you, at this stage I probably could because they're so useless. But
if you had the you gave a bad example.
I did give a bad example.
Because if you had the talent,
yes.
you could.
Yes.
Many women have the talent but can't.
They have the talent to preach, they have the talent to love, they have the talent to understand, but they don't have the God-given gift of being a man. And when Jesus only ordained men, we don't have the authority to contradict Scripture. This is not about equality. And it's very interesting, and I think rather illuminating, that those women who are the most faithful Catholics, they don't talk about female ordination. That's not something they want. Women's voices must be heard. We have the Virgin Mary, Our Lady, we revere. Now, we're mocked for that, a woman.
By whom?
Oh, Protestant Christians are constantly mocking, which is ironic because some of their founders, Luther, Zwingli, Calvin, Haas, they all revered, actually, Mary. But I think we are mocked for that. Doctors of the Church, Mother Teresa, Mother Angelica, people who've shaped the Church so very much. Women's voices certainly have to be heard, but ordination is not about equality, and it's not about the place of women, it's about the place of the priest. The main role of the vocation of a Catholic priest is to represent Jesus at the Mass.
Why can't a woman do that?
Well, I don't think a woman can do that.
Why not?
Because if we look at Scripture, and the early church, it was never permitted. It's not that we're making up as we go along. It's that Jesus gave certain commands. That when he showed himself for the first time, it was to women whose testimony in a court in first century Judea, Palestine, was worth half of that of a man. So he wasn't saying women are not equal. And in fact, the reason so many women became Christians and slaves became Christians in the early church, it was based on equality and liberation. But never at that time were women ordained.
But if anybody's taking the host from a man, they're never under the illusion that they're taking it from Jesus.
It is Jesus. I mean, it is the body of Jesus.
But the person who hands it to you, the fact that that person is a male, nobody's confusing that
well,
person
actually,
for
there are
Jesus.
women who do that. I mean, but serving at the altar is something different. But you see, also, there's a basic premise here that somehow there aren't enough clergy around. That isn't true. In Africa and Asia, they can barely cope with the number of young men who want to be clergy.
North America.
The numbers went down terribly in the late 60s and 70s. Now, they've come up now. They're never going to be what they were. I have no illusions there.
You do something in this book which you like to do, which is, and you just did it again here. You say, we're constantly mocked for this, or we're constantly abused for this, or insulted for this. And I must tell you, unless I'm reading the wrong newspapers, I don't see a lot of that. I don't see a lot of mocking of in fact, two of the last three popes have been quite beloved. Francis and John Paul II, I think certainly John Paul II was a superstar, and Francis is, if he's not one already, he's certainly well on his way to being one.
Yeah,
admittedly, Benedict XVI was not everybody's idea of
Steve, the things that he was accused of being a Nazi, a Rottweiler. He was the most gentle, compassionate, loving of men. The most horrible things were said. And John Paul II, later on, things changed a little, but he was accused of, we have this sort of law of diminishing papal nastiness. People forget what they said about popes at the time.
They loved him from the beginning. He was the guy who helped end the Cold War. He was the guy who helped bring down Jaruzelski in Poland.
Read some of what was said
about
He was
shot, for goodness sakes.
Well, that's not exactly an act of love, is it?
No, but
he was shot.
But my point is, though, he had international sympathy on his side almost from the get-go, if not for his fighting communism, then for the fact that he came back from an assassination attempt, to the fact that he was a hero to so many young people.
If you read what Christopher Hitchens, who was a friend of mine, the late Chris Hitchens or Dawkins or Sam Harris said about Pope John Paul, all sorts of horrendous things were said. But he certainly had a charisma, his acting ability, the way he met people. Benedict was treated very... I see now, we obviously see things through the prism of our own experience and our own lives, and we have certain sensitivities. But I have seen Catholicism mocked and abused on television far more than any other denomination.
In this country?
Oh, yeah.
By whom?
More so in the UK and Europe, and even to the United States. And in the US, I mean, watch a few daily shows and see what happens.
Oh, but that's a comedy show. They're supposed to do that. They mock everybody.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to mock Islam or Judaism the same. And do you really think that people would say about Catholicism what they say about Islam? Islam that it has to be debated and discussed. I mean, all sorts of fundamental and fundamentalist problems within Islam, but very little is said.
I want to put one more quote on the table. This from a well-known New York Times columnist who was writing about a month or so ago when he said, "Now it's your turn to be part of the loyal opposition," a fellow Catholic journalist said to me earlier this year as Pope Francis's agenda was beginning to take shape. The friend was a political liberal and lifelong Democrat, accustomed to being on the wrong side of his church's teaching on issues like abortion, bioethics, and same-sex marriage. Now, he cheerfully suggested, right-leaning Catholics like me would get a taste of the same experience from a pope who seemed intent on skirting the culture war and stressing the church's mission to the poor instead. Alicia, your thoughts on that comment?
I work in Catholic media, so we tend to get it from both sides. If we do something that the people on the right don't like, we get it. If we do something that isn't quite open enough, we get it from the left.
That's called doing your job.
Yeah, well, exactly. If
they all don't like
you're in the middle,
your
you're doing great. This has a ring of truth to it for me, from what I've seen. And in that exhortation, Francis pretty much blasts and he flat out, he doesn't mince words. He flat out says, if you're holding on to a style of worship that you believe is correct because it's linked to doctrinal purity or whatever, get over it, essentially. Well, he almost does say, get over it. So it is true, we are seeing more and more Catholics on that right-leaning side who are not happy with this because they're feeling that they're being told their love of this tradition is wrong.
They liked Benedict better.
They did like Benedict better, but remember that a lot of the stuff they're holding on to are things that come from a very specific history. So the groups that are very much tied to older forms of worship forget that all the visual stuff you see in those older forms of worship come out of a time, in some cases, out of Roman times. I mean, the red shoes were a sign of aristocracy in Roman times. And the Pope is not supposed to be that. The Pope is the successor of a fisherman. Right. The older forms of worship came out of very specific historical times where class structure was different. And we don't believe that anymore.
Okay, Peter, with just a couple of minutes left, let me put this to you here. I mean, it's all going really well for this Pope so far. And I wonder whether you are concerned that he's enjoying, in some respects, as a new politician does, a bit of a honeymoon phase here, but that the honeymoon, it never lasts forever, right?
Yeah. Popes don't take honeymoons by their nature. They skip the honeymoon.
Very droll.
I don't think whether a pope remains popular before the world's media or not, as I said earlier, is really the measure of his success. I know the story of an Italian priest who used to bicycle 30 kilometers to preach to a small group, and sometimes nobody would show up, and yet he would keep going because one person might show up. Ultimately, that's the mission of any priest in the church, of any bishop, of the Pope himself, is to save one soul at a time, to be part of the process of saving one soul at a time. Yeah. So his popularity, 9 months from now, is really not the issue. The issue is the Holy Spirit moving through the church, moving through the world.
More than 20%, almost 7 million of us living in this country were not born here. It's the highest percentage among the G8 countries, exceeded only by Australia. In Toronto, the percentage of our neighbors for whom English is not a mother tongue is roughly 46%. One frequently hears it on the streets of Ontario's capital city or in its malls or subways. Not so much on television or radio. To rectify that imbalance somewhat, we have invited 5 guests to learn more about how it feels to live and work while speaking an accented English. Mayank, you recently wrote something on the website canadianimmigrant.ca about speaking with an accent, and I want to read that and then chat with you a bit about it. Here's a piece of that account. Accent, you wrote, is a strange thing. It gives variety to a language, an identity to a person, adds spice to a conversation. Accent is diversity and multiculturalism personified. But make no mistake, it's not desirable. Those who have it would prefer to lose it. Those who don't can't understand the misery that those who have it experience. It's a barrier to communication. Even the most educated and articulate person will find it hard to communicate if he or she has a pronounced accent. you think that accent you have is a misery?
Initially it was, and I'll tell you why. Because when I came here, I was already in my mid-40s. And I had, a very successful working life in India. I tried looking for similar kind of jobs that I was doing, excuse me. And one of the biggest problems that I faced was not being able to make the other person on the phone understand that despite how I sounded, I could actually do the job. And repeatedly that experience I had for over a year, and everybody faces that experience. No, I'm not alone. But I had to go through a lot of misery merely to try and communicate with the other person, just to say that, I can do this, don't go by how I speak.
So the assumption was if you have an accent, you're probably not as intelligent and may not be able to do the job.
As
is that
you
the
know,
problem?
yeah, that is the problem, because they would tend to believe that you do not have Canadian experience, and your accent is actually saying that in so many words or in so many ways.
So what job were you doing back in India?
Oh, I used to be a commercial specialist working for a consulate, so I was promoting trade.
And what jobs did you have to take when you first came here?
I was a security guard for almost a year. My first winter in Canada was patrolling a condo.
Hayne, did you find having the accent when you first came here, as Mayank says, a misery?
Yes. As a teenager, I wanted to fit into high school culture, but it was really hard for me. So it was miserable. And one of my ESL teachers told me that if I have an accent, it'll be hard for me to get a job or to find a friend. For a professional career, it has not been much of a problem for me, but I help out my parents at my parents' store every Christmas, and when they see me with a heavy accent, they just assume I have a very low intelligence, so people are not so understanding. I find that.
You're not pleased with that assumption that they make about you?
No, sometimes I'm a little slow with the change, and the customer goes, "Why? You cannot do math, huh?" Ha ha ha. I have an engineering degree.
Your accent has not held you back. You're an architect, right? You're doing fine.
That's right.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it has worked as an advantage in certain ways.
How so?
Like, for instance, I give you an example. A colleague of mine at the university, because also I'm a professor of architecture, he's told me once, perhaps ungenerously, he said, "Oh, Rodolphe, it doesn't matter what you say, but because of your accent, anything you say sounds profound." And I think there may be a little tiny kernel of truth in that accents sometimes they give a certain cachet. So I don't think there's a universal situation here. It really depends on what kind of accent, in what situation, in what context, and sometimes they are actually positive attributes.
Let's have, again, cameras in the streets, and these are another set of opinions from non-accented Torontonians about how they respond to accented Torontonians, if I can put it that way. Roll tape, please.
It's always kind of an anxious situation saying, "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?"
Sometimes I experience a serious anxiety about not being able to understand them or respond in ways that are adequate and contextual.
If it's someone I'm likely to see more than once, then I'll just try to work with it. I'll just try to sort of adjust to it. And if it's someone who I'm just sort of meeting in passing, then I'll likely just try to be polite as I can and move on.
You just have to be patient and I guess keep calm if you're rushed.
So I pin it on myself, like it's my hearing problem.
Rather than saying, "I can't understand a word you're saying,"
If I don't get it initially, I just keep walking.
Just keep walking. Does that happen to anybody around this table here? People they didn't understand, they're afraid to be embarrassing, so they just walk away?
I think
Anybody?
that
Yes?
people are concerned with communication and understanding. So I believe that the first reaction does not have anything to do with prejudgment, but with understanding. We speak so that we can talk together and to understand each other. And in order for me to get my message across to you, you have to understand it. Then I think might come the prejudice. But I find that in Toronto, since it's a very international community, people are usually very polite and patient with each other, and they do wait until they understand. I'm not saying that there might not be some attitudes with certain people. For once, for example, if I get in a call center somebody that I don't understand, first I try to understand. I think I do my part. If I fail for different reasons, maybe because I'm very impatient, I'm in a hurry, or probably the situation is very complicated, I have to admit it, I simply do this. I say, okay, maybe I have a mistake here and I called in error, everything is fine, and I have to call back.
Ato, what do you do when you're talking to somebody else who has a very thick accent that you are having trouble understanding?
Okay, I'm used to teaching people with thick accents. So in my line of duty, I cannot just walk off because it's my job. So I've never had I have had, like calling Bell Canada for something and the call obviously goes to a call center and the person speaks in a very thick accent. I just wait it out and try to figure out. I may ask them to repeat themselves a few times, but in a way it's a transfer from my line of work where I actually have lots of students who carry accents. So I haven't had, sometimes it's irritating, and that is true, sometimes, especially when you're in a hurry. When you're in a hurry, or as Athena said, when the matter is a little bit complicated. But I haven't had occasion to...
Not too bad.
To walk off.
Romeo Dallaire, who of course had his own PTSD issues as a result of his efforts in Rwanda, made a prediction. What prediction did he make?
In the film, and he says it twice, and people who watch the film will see this, he says that he predicts that, and he says it's very sorry about this prediction, but when we pull soldiers out of the battlefield, we often forget to give them services that they need. And so we ramp everything down. And then he says, he predicts this, he's very sorry to predict it, but then we will see more suicides.
And he has sadly been correct about that. I think one of the things that I found most shocking, having seen the documentary, is that it seems like in most wars, twice as many soldiers are dying of suicide after the war, after they come home, than who died on the battlefield during the war. What are we botching so badly when they come home that this happens so much?
I think that's the answer we all need to be searching for. At the moment, 22 soldiers are killing themselves every day in the United States, 22. But at least in the United States, they're recognizing that they have a problem and they're trying to do something about it. In Canada, when I look at the statistics, I feel like Alice in Wonderland because I'm getting a set of statistics from the government that are completely different from individual private surveys. We don't look at suicides in people who've left the army. We don't look at suicides in reservists. We don't cover them. We don't follow them. So I think the statistics, well, like I say, I don't know about what these statistics really are. I just feel like Alice in Wonderland every time I try to figure them out.
Judy, you of course have pointed your camera at a very macho culture, the military. And I'm wondering, how does the military brass view suicide?
Well, you've seen last week, all of the top people in the army have come out and said, please come forward if you're feeling pain, if you're feeling emotional pain. The problem in doing that is at lower levels that may not be acceptable. And the problem also is that there is a stigma. And I'm seeing something else come out here. The whole idea is to step out, forget stigma, be honest and come forward. But we're also seeing, I think, some of these suicides are connected to people being dismissed from their jobs in the army because they're no longer able to serve. And I think that you cannot really go on Civvy Street and say, hi, here I am, I've got PTSD, give me a job. Because I don't think it goes down very well in your life or my life or the people that are hired that we know.
But is it your view that if a treatment for PTSD can be found, these suicides can be prevented?
I think you have to say every suicide is preventable. And it's not to do with treatment, it's to do with people knowing that there are people in pain. It's to do with community, it's standing up for each other.
And it's still the case, I guess, among too many soldiers that in this macho culture, they feel they can't really You know, it's one thing to ask for treatment for a leg that's been blown off, but if your head hurts, there's still this sense that I can't seek help for that. Is that right?
There's definitely that sense, but I think we also have to think there's another piece of this puzzle that we're missing as well, which is the wives and the children. The wives are the heroes in this. They deal with these men coming back who aren't, usually the man who comes back is not the man who went. And the children are influenced by it too. There's something called intergenerational post-traumatic stress. So if you've got it within your family, it's going to affect you. We need to be thinking very, very widely about this.
What was happening in your life that made you think something is amiss here?
I was drinking. I've got 4 beautiful little daughters as well, so I was seeing them get affected, you know, my wife. Everything was just kind of crumbling around me, and to which point I pretty much put my hand up and said, you know, I'm messed up. What do I do?
So you literally were just unable to cope?
Yeah, and I was taken out of my environment in Petawawa with all my friends and whatnot, and I was put in Toronto, right? So I didn't really have the safety net of my friends to vent with and joke around. So it was a bit of a shock looking back. Not at the time, I was just going through it.
You guys are groomed, though, to be tough SOBs, right?
Yep.
How hard is it to ask for help?
Oh, it's extremely hard. The military's built on being tough, you know, and better than another unit or another section and so on. So to be that guy to put up your hand and say something's wrong, you know, it's a hard hurdle to get over mentally, right? Because you're very afraid of what your friends are going to think of you, mostly at a peer level. That's the biggest hurdle.
Padre, what kind of stuff have you seen post-Afghanistan with our returning troops?
Well, I think in the next number of years we will see, you know, as the Ombudsman has said, an upswing in, you know, post-traumatic stress and other operational stress injuries manifesting themselves. And because for some people, they notice right away. Some people, you know, it for some reason just percolates there for a while, and the symptoms take a while to be recognized by others, and then most importantly by the individuals. And of course, as Chris has said, it's, you know, then getting yourself to the point where you think, hey, I need some help, and sticking up your hand.
You've been in it for a couple of decades, though.
Yeah.
Is there anything different about what the troops are coming home with today versus 25 years ago?
Not really. I mean, you can go back to you know, Somalia, Rwanda, you know, some of those. I mean, the most famous soldier to come out of Rwanda in public with his post-traumatic stress is Romeo Dallaire.
Sure.
You know, and if you tour, you know, the battlefields of France, I'm sure that many of those things were there as well, and you know, Korea and all conflicts, because it, you know, PTSD, operational stress injuries, mental health issues, you know, can arise for a number of reasons. You know, the resiliency that the individual has, who they are, what their worldview is, and sometimes one of the I think least explored categories as to some of the causes, et cetera, is it's kind of a moral injury. And
a moral injury?
A moral injury.
How so?
Well, it's kind of like the old cowboy movies. You know, when you take what a soldier does, he's the guy with the white hat. We all, you know, everybody, the wonderful men and women that, you know, I've served with, and that they joined to make a difference, to make things better. So when they go and they're trained and they're positive, and you have to have that positive, you know, it's not a natural thing to run towards trouble and to go towards the fight. Most of us would want to stay out of danger, and soldiers have to sometimes enter into very dangerous, so that they have that confidence and that swagger and that training. And they're kind of like that old Western movie where they got the white hat, and their job is to deal with the guys with the black hats.
Let me ask that to you, Chris. Did you embrace the danger that came as a part of your job?
Oh yeah. You practice to be a soldier for so long, and so many exercises, endless, and you finally get the chance to be one. You're very anxious to get in the fight. Absolutely, yes.
You not only went to Iraq to chip in. You went to Fallujah, which is, well, that's not a safe part of Iraq. Not that there were any safe parts, but that surely was one of the least safe. Why did you want to go there?
Well, you know, I got to Baghdad, to the Green Zone. I was 24 years old. I was the only person working for USAID in Iraq that spoke Arabic. And I'd lived all throughout the Middle East. And I got there with a somewhat naive intention to, I thought I was going there to help rebuild the country, yet all I was doing was sort of this nonsensical paperwork for the agency, and I wasn't getting out into the country. I didn't feel like I was making any impact. And I hadn't gone to Iraq to just hang out at parties in the Green Zone. I wanted to try to do something, and so I started to agitate for a position outside of Baghdad, and in response to that request, they sent me to Fallujah. So I was USAID's first coordinator for the efforts to rebuild that city. And at the time, Fallujah was still the nexus of the insurgency. The U.S. had basically turned 1/3 of the city into rubble, and about 2/3 of the residents of Fallujah were still not even living in the city. But Fallujah had become sort of like the flashpoint for the war, and whoever won Fallujah would win the war, was the way the thinking went. And so I went there. I just had turned 25, and I went there to try to make some sense of what we might be able to do to improve the lives of those living in the city.
Fair to say going to Fallujah messed you up a bit?
What is required of you in a situation like that has to inevitably produce consequences in your thinking. So every day I would ride through town in the back of a Humvee, an open-air sort of military truck, and I would have to be constantly scanning every little bit of trash along the roadside to see if it was concealing a bomb. I would be scanning the tree trunks to see if there were any wires coming up the branches that might be concealing a bomb. I would be studying the amount of clothing that Iraqis were wearing to see if they might be hiding a suicide bomber's vest underneath. You can't ask your brain to do that without it taking a toll. And even though at the time I felt very engaged, I was excited about my work, it was very challenging. But I didn't feel like I had post-traumatic stress or anything. I just felt like this is what I went to Iraq to do, to try to make a difference. It wasn't until I took a vacation at the end of 1 year that I really realized that I was suffering from PTSD.
Well, that's where I want you to pick up the story, because you did in fact go on a vacation to the Dominican Republic, and you know, as much as I know you don't want to relive it, why don't you tell everybody, because you do write about it in the book, what you did there?
Yeah, I'm the guy that takes a vacation from the most dangerous city on the face of the planet to have his near-death experience in the Caribbean. Irony is a pretty meaningless word for me at this point. On the second night of my vacation, I went to the Dominican Republic to meet with my family. And on my second night there, I entered into what's called a dissociative fugue state, which happens to a lot of people returning from a war zone. In essence, it's sleepwalking, but highly functional sleepwalking. And so in my case, in the middle of the night, I got out of my bed, I walked over to my hotel window, I opened up the latch and crawled out onto the ledge. A resort guard at about 4:30 in the morning walked past and saw me and started yelling at me and pointing a flashlight, and he said that I was yelling back at him. I have no recollection of this incident. And as he started to run around to the front of the condo to wake up my family, he heard the thud of my body falling to concrete. And I fell about 18 feet and broke both of my wrists. I broke my jaw, my nose. I cracked my skull in 2 places, and I tore my face up to such an extent that I needed about 70 or 80 stitches to stanch the bleeding. I got myself up and went over to where my parents were staying in the next condo over, and my memory begins shortly thereafter, and it's a pretty unpleasant memory. In fact, it's a pretty unpleasant year of my life, to be honest, from that point on, because it was basically a year of surgery, a year of fighting off the same 2 or 3 nightmares that would come back to me every night, but also a year of watching the projects that I had initiated in Fallujah unravel in my absence. And I basically felt that I had just completely failed, that I had just risked my life and nearly died, and not a single tiny thing was for the better in Iraq. It had all been completely pointless.
Let's get to the nub of the book now, which is you somehow became the point man for many Iraqis who helped the United States in its efforts militarily in Iraq, and have subsequently been seen with great suspicion by other Iraqis as somehow aiding and abetting the enemy. How is it that you became that guy that so many people went to say, Kirk, I'm in trouble, they think I'm a traitor, help me get out of Iraq?
I will be completely honest in saying that I had no designs on that role. I had no plan to end up taking on that responsibility. What really happened was that roughly about 1 year after my accident, I had pretty much given up on Iraq. I felt like a defeated person, frankly, and I was trying to move on with life. But I got an email from an Iraqi colleague of mine. We had worked together at USAID, and he had been photographed or identified walking out of the green zone one afternoon after several years of service to the US government. There were militia members that would hang outside of the bases in the green zone with the sole function of trying to target Iraqis helping the Americans in order to kill them. And my friend had evaded them for years, but one afternoon he slipped up and confirmed his identity. And the next morning he walked out and found the severed head of a dog on his front steps with a note saying that if he didn't leave Iraq, that his head would be next. And he raced back to the green zone, back to the US government, and said, "You've got to help me. They're going to kill me. I need protection." And the US government looked at him and they said, "Tough, you're on your own. If you don't sort this out in the next 2 weeks, we're going to have to give your job to somebody else." And so my friend, without any help from his employer, from the United States of America, he and his wife packed everything they could into a couple bags and they fled Iraq to Dubai, where he ducked into an internet cafe and he sent me an email. And he and I had become close in part because I spoke Arabic with him. And I have to say that there was something about receiving that email that was kind of like a light switch moment in my life, where I realized I had been spending all this time feeling sorry for myself and feeling frustrated. But I had survived. I was fine in the big scheme of things, and my friend was in a much worse situation. And I thought that maybe if I could just help this one friend, that it wouldn't be a complete failure, that maybe that would all have been worth it. I could have one tiny little success to hold on to.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review. You can see all of those programs in their entirety. They're all on our website, theagenda.tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, and on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/theagenda.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.